gastro, and he had neuropathy. That's what it was. I'm having word problems today. Anyway, and he couldn't hardly get up, but he got sat down in there, and I talked to him, shook hands, and went on that side of the room over there where Steve and all those yahoos are, and shook hands with all them. And so I went back, and I was trying to get over here to a couple to shake hands with them, and so here comes Tim, and I'm just trying to let him by. I thought he's always on a mission on Sunday because he's trying to get everything right. I don't even say hi because I don't want to interrupt him. So anyway, he stops and says, "Will you do the service Wednesday night?" I said, "Okay." He said, "I got 2 songs." So he must have known I was going to do it. So anyway, the fellow behind me, he said, "Boy, they're putting you to work, aren't they?" and then in a minute, guy comes up and he says, "Can you help us with the offering today?" And I said, "Sure." That guy taps me on the shoulder and he says, "Your paycheck is going to have a big increase next week." So, so anyway, you had to get him up, didn't you? Twice. He couldn't get up. That was a shame. So anyway, I want to do another song. This is one of my favorite, it was my favorite song until probably I was in my 20s and it changed to Willie Nelson, Amazing Grace. But anyway, this is Holy, Holy, Holy. It's page 2. And in my days, my younger days in church, this was page 1. So, and then there was another one, anyway, it was 212, and it's not the same song. So I guess they've changed. So anyway, let's do this a cappella, and I want to do the second verse, okay? I'll get away from the microphone so y'all can hear me. All right, everybody got page 2? Want to stand up so I can really hear y'all. Give y'all some exercise. Okay, this is in 4/4 time, and we've got 2 sharps. So, okay. Holy, holy, let's start all over. Holy, 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 all the saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the blessed sea. Cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, who word and art and evermore shall be. Now, you can see why I need music. Okay, be seated. A guy named Stephen Covey wrote a book, it may have been 30 years ago, may have been a little longer than that, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in this, he came up with a chart. I call it a 4-corner chart. So if we were looking up here, we'd say top left quadrant, top right quadrant, below that, those would be the 4 quadrants. So in quadrant 1, it says includes activities that are important and urgent. These are life-threatening crises, pressing problems at home or work, or deadline-driven projects. Now we have some of those, but we don't have too many that are life-threatening or, we do have deadline-driven projects, like the church building over here. I don't know, we have a definite deadline, but if we go too long, we're not going to have, we'll lose faith in it, and we don't want to do that. We want to get it done so we can get in it. Quadrant 2 includes activities that are important but not urgent. These are building relationships, planning for your future, or taking time off to rest. So, a lot of times, these are things we can put off. I'm good at putting things off if I can. So, quadrant 3 includes activities that are not important but urgent. And some of these I'm not sure about in our today's world. Back then it was a little different. But these include answering calls, text. Now most of y'all know that if you get that ding that says I got a text, boy, you grab that phone and you are on it. So that's implies that that's urgent, but isn't. But anyway, emails. Used to, I'd read all my emails every day, but I don't even hardly look at them anymore. Attending meetings. If you're retired, you don't have many meetings. Or addressing various matters at home or work. Quadrant 4 includes activities that are not important and not urgent. Now this falls into things I do a lot. It's watching television, surfing the internet. I know somebody that does that. Scrolling through the social media or doing busy work. So you can, that was something we had to read at work. You know, you just had to read it. If you didn't read it, you didn't get a raise next time. So is that my phone? Is that your phone? Okay, I thought I'd turn mine on. According to Covey, most of us spend the majority of our lives in all the quadrants except number 2. And number 2 was important but not urgent. That's building relationships, planning for the future, and taking time off to rest. And these, somebody once said that the important things in life are seldom urgent, and the urgent things in life are seldom important. I don't know if y'all ever heard that or not, but I've heard that. So, at the top of the list that should be important but not urgent is our worship of God. Now, there's not much that cries out for us every day that says, worship, worship, worship. You know, it's something we have to decide to do. And I don't think anybody would argue that worship is not important. It's just us taking the time to do it. When we get to heaven, we're probably going to be doing a lot of worship. What do you think about when you think about heaven? What do you think it's going to be like?
No suffering.
No suffering. What else?
I'll have a new body.
Have a new body. Yeah, all right. We certainly hope so, don't we? What was that you said? You wouldn't get older? What'd you say when we walked in?
I said, someday I'm going to be young.
You're going to be young again. Yeah, I remember that. I want to be young too. So, no, I don't care. I just want to be there. So, the Bible doesn't tell us a whole lot about heaven. And we're in Revelation now in our Sunday school class, and chapter 4 and chapter 5 are in heaven, and then a lot of the other is, it's not good news. It's one thing I remembered was that there are going to be bowls full of wrath that's poured out on the earth, and we just have to hope we're going to be there. I'm planning on being up there where I don't have to deal with that. But, a lot of people I think about Guy, I'm Vern too probably, but I know they're fishermen, and I've heard, a lot of guys say, when I get to heaven, I'm gonna bass fish every day. And the golfers, anybody in here a golfer? This really, I don't think I've met anybody here that plays golf. Now, I don't play golf, but where I came from, there's a lot of people play golf. That's all they did every weekend. But I don't know that they're gonna be playing golf in heaven. And, the person that keeps house, They don't have to worry about mopping those floors every day. My wife's doing this. I know. I put that in there for her because I know sometimes she can't settle down and do nothing. Yeah, sometimes I can do nothing pretty good, but she can't hardly do that, and she won't have to do that. So, but in Revelation, in chapter 4, it talks about what's going on, and there's 24 elders, and there's some 4 beasts, and they're all worshiping God. That's all it talks about they're doing, and they're singing worship songs, and God's on his throne. I can't see him, or John couldn't see him, and it's like he's God's light, but he couldn't see a visual person. So it's kind of like Moses when he was up on the mountain, and God, he could see light or a mist or a cloud or however he described it, but he couldn't see God. And I don't know. I wondered about Adam and Eve, because God talked to them every day in the cool of the evening, and so I wondered if they could see him or not. That's just something I wonder about. And so in 4 and 5, chapters 4 and 5, that's the prelude to the tribulation, and Jesus was talking and talks to John. He says, "Because you have kept my word and my perseverance, I also will keep you from the hour of testing which is about to come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth." And so the church is in heaven, so the ones that are dwelling there are not saved. And Jesus makes a promise to the entire church before a coming time of worldwide testing. Jesus saying there is a group of Christians who will they will go through this. They won't have to go through this, and they'll be kept from it. And the word "from" in Greek is "ek." And when I read that, I thought, that's an old saying we had as kids. We'd say, kind of "eke by on that." And I don't know if that was an East Texas saying or not, but that was something we said in North Texas. So I thought that was interesting to me. But Jesus is saying there's a group of Christians who will they'll be kept from that, and God's promise is that we do not have to suffer his wrath. That doesn't mean that we're exempt from persecution or troubles, but we won't have to fear God's wrath. And when I was reading that, I thought, Tim's talking about does God punish us? And the first night I heard it, I think the first 2 times he talked, I stayed home because Mary was just getting over her foot surgery, and I missed it. But when he asked that question, I thought, that's a strange question, and I had to think about it. And I thought, well, my first indication is I'd say no, he doesn't punish us. And then the more I thought about it, Jesus died for our sins. That's the sins we had in the past, the ones we have now, and the ones we have in the future. Why would he punish us if he's already forgiven us of our sins? So that kind of put a little different light on what Tim was trying to tell us, I think, in that he said God doesn't punish us. Now he does. Let's see, what's the word he used? He can discipline it. Yeah. He will discipline us. That's what that was his word. So, it's not. There's a big difference between punishment and discipline. And I know when he put the words or the synonyms up there for each one of those words, the ones for punishment, those words are very, very harsh. And the ones for discipline were things you didn't necessarily want to have happen to you, but it wasn't anywhere near like the ones that were for punishment. So anyway, I thought that fit into that. And in Revelation 4:3, John recorded what he saw when he entered the throne from heaven and saw God sitting on the throne. Now, I don't think he actually saw God in the person God, but he could see that God was on the throne. And he talks about, in a lot of the words he says, it's like this. He calls whatever the surface is up there, he says it's like a sea. And I think, he ran into some of those same problems when he's talking about later on the horrors that are going to be on earth, because John couldn't imagine what a tank was, or a missile, or a bomb. So he would have to try to describe that in the terms of that day. So, but I think, God's trying to lead us and tell us what's going to happen in the end times. It's not maybe or what if, but it's going to happen. But, he's trying to put it in words that, in the way John could describe it. And in chapter 4 also, there are several hymns, and one of them is the hymn of creation. And when we're talking about what heaven's going to be like, Mary bought me 2 books. One was J. Vernon McGee. He wrote it, and he's an old-time preacher. He's dead, and he was born somewhere in the Midwest. I don't know where, but he writes like he's a country boy, like us, like we'd write. And then the other one was Rob Jeffers from First Baptist Church in Dallas. So totally different styles and what they write and all that. But McGee tickled me. In the portion where it talks about what heaven's going to be like, they're singing and they're playing harps, and he says, I hate to say this, but that's not really what I want to do. He said, but if you just want to go to heaven and not go to hell, that's the right thing to do. So anyway, he didn't think playing the harp was going to be something that wasn't going to be a lot of fun, and singing all day. He says, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. And so that's a lot different than the fisherman saying, I'm going to bass fish all day, as versus singing and so you have to try to figure out what heaven's like. I mean, it's just, I never had really thought about that. And when you get in these people, these elders that are up there, and these beasts, but they're praising God day and night. And so I told y'all one of my favorite songs was the Holy, 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 and then I graduated to Elvis's How Great They Are for a while, and then it was Willie Nelson's Amazing Grace. And what I really liked about that song, his sister Bobby played the piano, and she, in that, they have it's kind of where they don't sing, and it's an instrumental time, and she's playing with one hand on that piano, and it's only the melody, and she's playing on the high end of it. I don't know what you call that, but anyway, be the right hand side of the piano. And it's just so simple and concise, and it just made me think, that's the way grace is. Grace is just simple. You just believe on Jesus as your Savior, and you'll be saved. And I always admired that about that song. let's see. These creatures, they worshiped God all the time, and they said, "Holy, holy, holy," and that's made me think of that song when they said that. And in Greek and Hebrew, if they don't have exclamation points in their language. So if you want to emphasize something, then Jesus would say, "Verily, verily, I say unto you." And he would say, "Truly, truly, I say." And that was to get the disciples' attention, slap them upside the head with a 2x4 and say, "You need to pay attention to this and take this in." And so these creatures are singing, "Holy, holy, holy." And that is the only time in the Bible that there's a repeat like that, where it's 3 words or 3 together to emphasize that. And so that it was really important. And Jeffers made a comment in his commentary that nowhere in the Bible is God ever called love, 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 or just. You know, and that made me think of, we hear people say, "How can a God of love let this happen?" You know, so, but he's holy, holy, holy. It's not necessarily love, love, love. Now God, it points, the 3 beasts point out that God is, he has complete otherness. I had never thought of that word before until I read that, but he's separated from anything and anyone else in the universe. And he is omnipotent, omnipotent, he's all powerful, and he has eternality. I've never heard that word before. So evidently I hadn't read enough Christian literature to get around to those, but I know what eternality means, I think, anyway. But God, we can't even imagine, I can't imagine how powerful God is. So, in the new heaven and the new earth, we're going to do a lot of things, but worship is probably going to be the one that we would be involved in the most. And everything we do in heaven is going to be centered around the worship of God. And I have to admit that worshiping God, I never had really considered doing that much. And I think, when I thought about it, it's, you know, I grew up where you didn't worship anything. You know, you didn't want to worship the devil, you didn't want to worship rock and roll, you didn't want to worship anything because that was bad. And so I kind of assumed, I guess, some way that was bad to worship God. It just had the wrong connotation to it. But I can see when we read chapter 4 that that's what they do, and that's what I need to learn to do. And when you think about heaven, I think we have to kind of think about heaven like it is here. There are a lot of things that we don't know how to handle, and we don't know what to do, and we just let God have his way. And I think when we get to heaven, then that's going to be the same thing. We're going to have to let him show us the way when we get there and what all we're going to do. But we'll just be blessed to be there. And I go back to the song, "Holy, holy, holy, all the saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, who was and is and evermore will be. So that song has even more of a meaning for me now that I've read chapter 4 and chapter 5 in Revelation. So I can see where that song comes from. Any questions? One thing I wanted to end with is my buddy Steve back here. In Tim's sermon Sunday night, he talked about Goliath, and it made me think about him having them big swords and all that. And anyway, Steve said that David didn't kill Goliath with the stone. He knocked him down and stunned him, but when he cut his head off is when he killed him. And he said that's what it says in there when he read it. We talk a lot about in our class that you have to read every word, and many times you have to read it several times before you understand it. And so he was talking about that's what he did. He read it several times before he figured that out, right? So anyway, and I told him, Tim was talking about that, and in my Bible, it's a Schofield Bible, it has notes in it. Some of them are big. It'll say the definition of grace, and it'll give a half a page on that. And it listed the giants in the Bible. And so I just looked at that and started reading them, and it had the Nephilim and Genesis, and there's, looked like they were 8 or 10 anyway. But I noticed there was another Goliath. There's 2 Goliaths in the Bible. And one of them's a couple of chapters after that, so I just went over there and read that. And this giant had 6 toes and 6 fingers on each foot and hand. And guess who killed him?
David's brother, wasn't it?
David's brother. I thought, well, I know that. God planned that out. I don't think that could be, that couldn't be incidental that happened. So, anyway. Enjoyed tonight? So,
Yes, sir. Pretty much.
Vern, would you lead us in closing prayer?